Should the man pay on the first date? At the end of a first date, a woman pulls a wallet with almost no money out of her bag just for show, while a man tries his hardest to insist on paying the bill himself. Many people have seen or experienced that kind of awkward back and forth. Should the man cover the entire bill on a first date, or is splitting it from the start the fairest option? In this video, we run a 10-round, 20-turn debate where both sides argue on equal footing. Which side are you on? Tell us in the comments. Now, let's get started.
I think the man should pay on a first date. In Japan, there has long been a custom that the man pays on a date, and many people act on that assumption. If you ignore that premise and suggest splitting the bill, there is a high risk of being seen as stingy or as not valuing the other person. To avoid creating unnecessary anxiety for your date, it is rational to treat it as basic social etiquette for the man to pay at least the first time.
Even if such a custom exists, that does not mean a man must always pay on a first date. Today, dual-income couples are the norm, women's earning power has improved, and more people hold the view that I want to pay my own share. If we uniformly say the man should pay, we strengthen traditional gender roles. For men with lower incomes, the financial burden is simply too heavy. From the standpoint of fairness, going Dutch or sharing the cost flexibly makes more sense.
A first date is not just about settling the bill. It is a chance to build trust. When a man smoothly picks up the tab, he's sending a message. I'll take responsibility for having set up this occasion, and I want you to feel comfortable today. Psychology also shows that first impressions strongly influence later evaluations. If the difference is only a few thousand yen, it is reasonable to regard it as an investment in making a good impression that can be easily recovered later.
It is risky to tie paying money too closely to proof of sincerity. The person who pays may start to feel, after spending this much, I deserve something in return, while the person being treated may feel, since they paid, it's harder to say no. Economic advantage can easily turn into psychological pressure and can even become a factor in so-called date harassment. Especially in the early stages when people barely know each other, it is safer not to create monetary debts at all.
In reality, there are countless stories of people saying that when they suggested splitting the bill, the mood soured and there was no second date. On a first date, when you still don't know the other person's values, minimizing that risk is the rational choice. In the Japanese dating market, men are still often expected to take the lead, and that bundle of expectations usually includes handling the bill. Whatever the statistics say, acting in line with the current expectations is what maximizes your chances of success.
At the same time, there are just as many stories like being treated felt awkward, or I felt like I owed them something and it bothered me. The more independent or higher earning the woman, the more likely she is to think, I want to at least pay for myself, or I want to stand on equal footing. Online, you also see a lot of criticism of people who instantly label someone cheap just because they split the bill. Rather than focusing on whether such views are the majority, we should design rules that assume diverse values.
If you look calmly at the economic side, there is still an income gap between men and women on average in Japan. Overall, men are more likely to earn higher salaries. So if we follow the principle that the person with the higher income should pay more, in practice, it will often be the man paying on the first date. In that sense, it is not because he is a man, but that the general rule, the higher earner pays more, happens under current conditions to result in the man treating on a first date.
Even if such a statistical tendency exists, there is no guarantee that a specific couple fits that average. Two students may have similar amounts of parental support, and you can also have a non-regular male worker dating a full-time female employee. Automatically making the man pay because men earn more on average is crude. In fact, by ignoring individual circumstances and imposing fixed roles, that logic itself becomes unreasonable.
Overly precise bill splitting does not always fit the mood of a first date. Instead of calculating down to the last few hundred yen, it can feel more natural to say, "I'll get this one. Maybe you can get something next time," which also paves the way to a second outing. In practice, a system often works well where the man pays the first time, and then they adjust the balance over later dates. There is no need to insist on perfect 50-50 equality from the very first meeting.
The phrase, "you can get it next time," also creates an implicit debt. If the other person actually has no intention of meeting again, they may feel, "they treated me, so now it's harder to turn them down." Since a first date is also the opportunity to decide whether to continue the relationship, both people should remain free to walk away. Sharing the cost means each person can more easily choose to stop at any time, preserving that freedom and safety.
I understand the concern that debts feel heavy, but the really big amounts usually appear on later dates, high-end dinners, and so on. For a first date, you can choose a cafe or lunch spot where costs are relatively low, so picking up the tab is not such a major burden. In fact, insisting on equal splitting from the very first date can make you look overly calculating. A light treat is still a useful way to demonstrate generosity and composure and should not be dismissed too quickly.
If the amount is small, then that is precisely why splitting should not be an issue. We should question whether there is any real need to showcase generosity with just a couple of thousand yen. A person's attractiveness should be judged on conversation, thoughtfulness, and compatibility of values, not on whether they pay the bill. A culture that overemphasizes payment distorts our value system. Instead of trying to manipulate impressions with money, it is healthier in the long run to communicate frankly as equals.
Even acknowledging diverse values, the rule that the man should pay on a first date still aligns with the expectations of the majority in today's Japanese society. Etiquette is determined less by abstract justice and more by how the other party will perceive your behavior. Even if an individual believes in their own ideal rule set, as long as others judge actions against the existing rule, the person insisting on their ideal is the one who suffers. In this transitional era, people should anticipate that gap, and under current conditions, the safest move is still for the man to pay.
However, unless someone changes their behavior, the rules will never change. Continuing to follow traditional gender roles simply because I don't want to be disadvantaged is exactly what prevents progress. Surveys already show that younger generations are more supportive of splitting the bill or taking turns paying. Precisely because we are in a transitional period, we should see not the man automatically pays, but rather the two of us decide together what to do today as the emerging form of good manners.
We also have to consider the man's psychological burden. In many cases, men handle unseen tasks such as initiating the date, choosing the venue, making a reservation, and managing the logistics. If, on top of that, the bill is split, it is easy for them to feel, I'm the only one taking on risk and effort. When the person who took the lead in the preparations also takes care of the bill, the whole event feels like a coherent investment they themselves chose to make, which can improve their sense of satisfaction and closure.
The burden of planning and preparation is tied to the one who invited or proposed the date, not to gender. There are now many cases in which the woman selects the restaurant, makes the reservation, and plans the schedule. In those situations, insisting that it's a first date so the man should still pay is clearly unnatural. We should either let the person who did the most preparation decide or simply separate planning from payment. It is logically inconsistent to link "I planned the date, so I pay" specifically to being male.
Even while recognizing that values are diversifying, a practical rule of thumb for first dates is that the man pays by default, and if the other person clearly requests to split, then you go Dutch. Rather than negotiating at the table with "shall we split this?", it is smoother to say "I've got this one," and then adjust if the other person strongly insists. Trying to hammer out detailed payment rules in advance can itself sap the romantic atmosphere from the occasion.
Making "the man pays" the default and only shifting to splitting the bill when the woman strongly insists is not truly balanced. Any system that requires one side to speak up just to reach equality disadvantages those who remain silent. In Japan, talking directly about money is often seen as impolite, which makes it even harder to speak. If, from the beginning, we make it normal to casually discuss "how shall we handle the bill today?", we can reach agreement without killing the mood. The real problem is the attitude that treats open discussion itself as taboo.
In summary, given current cultural expectations and the risk of the date going poorly, the guideline that the man should pay on a first date is, while not perfectly fair, the most realistic rule for avoiding trouble. There can always be exceptions based on individual circumstances, but at the least, a man being prepared to pay and basically intending to cover the bill functions as a visible sign of respect and responsibility toward his date. In practice, behavior grounded in present realities should be prioritized over abstract ideals.
On the other hand, I believe that the one-way rule, "the man should pay on a first date," is outdated. If we value fairness, independence, gender equality, and psychological safety, then the cost should be shared according to mutual agreement and specific circumstances, not sex. Using cultural habits and fear of failure as excuses to preserve old roles only keeps structural problems alive. Precisely because a first date marks the beginning of a potential relationship between equals, we should start rebuilding our norms around money there without tying them to gender.
This concludes our 10-round debate on whether the man should pay on the first date. Who do you think should pay, and in what way to make things as fair as possible? Share your own experiences and opinions in the comments.